We understand that you are a participant in the local purchasing incentive program that we've all been talking quite a bit about, and had hoped you might be able to give us your perspective. We've heard from the schools, from school nutrition folks on one end of that transaction and how it's working for them, but thought it would be helpful to hear from the other end. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me here. Appreciate it. So yeah, I'm Mark Boyden. My family and I, we own Boyden Farm Beef in Cambridge. We've been doing the local beef thing since 2004, to the store, to Healthy Livings, the city markets, and to restaurants all around Vermont. And since then, we've grown into Vermont, New Hampshire, into Boston, and so forth. We also just recently purchased our own meat processing slaughterhouse. It is over in New Hampshire, but it was for sale and it was already up and running, and they were doing our beef anyhow, so it was a perfect fit. So yeah, we've got a lot of things in the works for expansion, and we've done a lot, with the local restaurants and the stores and all that in the past. So we have quite a bit of experience in that. And as far as the program you're talking about, it was very helpful to us, because it's always good to sell a lot of ground beef, because in my business, ground beef is everything, because everybody wants the ribeyes and tenderloins. There's an awful lot of ground beef left over. So it's nice to have that outlet for the ground beef. What I like about the program is, not only from our business standpoint, it helps us out, but I think it gives really good awareness to the parents and the community members, knowing that their local school is, hey, we're supporting so-and-so's vegetables, and we're getting Boyden Farm of Vermont beef and all that. But the other thing it does, and a lot of people don't really think about this, though, is as long as the kids know and they realize what's going on, it's not that long before kids grow up and all of a sudden they're the customers buying. So if kids grow up knowing that there's local food everywhere and they expect that, it changes the whole paradigm of how everything goes. All of a sudden, all the stores need to have that everywhere. So it's part of the gradual shift in mentality, which I think is a very important thing. The other thing about the program, couple things. It's great the program's out there. One concern I have is, how do we perpetuate it? Because I was very pleased to sell a lot of ground beef, especially in October and November, when a lot of times our sales dip off. So it really helped a lot. But I also been around long enough to realize that this was due to grant money. And the question is, well, this is great, we build a relationship, but what happens when the money goes away? Is once that happens, for example, there's one big business that does a lot of the schools statewide. They even do your state house cafeteria. Well, if all of a sudden the grant money is there, how do we get them to keep buying it if ours is, say, 40 cents a pound more than commodity? Because they just can't always pass that on to the customer. Sometimes they're not willing to. Sometimes a company will say, hey, I'm getting this, but I'm getting an extra 40 cents a pound selling it, but I can get commodity for 30 cents cheaper, and they'll keep it. And a lot of companies are famous for what I call splash and dash, where they'll have a chalkboard. We support these local farmers, and they'll list my name and somebody else's, somebody else's, and they buy once or twice a year. I go through that all the time. When I started in 2004, I didn't see that. Companies were really good about, hey, we have Boyden beef that's on the menu. But then over the years, it got so popular that people were playing the splash and dash game. So that's a challenge going forward as we do this, is how do we solve that issue? And one other issue in my case, and I'm very appreciative of this, is that in the program, we supplied Vermont beef, of course, from Vermont cattle. And initially, it had to be slaughtered and processed in Vermont. Well, we hit this roadblock where the one we were at imploded, lost all their help. We were given basically 1 day notice that don't bring any more cattle. We had to go to a place in New Hampshire. So I'm going to admit, I'm very biased in this. I hope going forward that we stick to the principles of Vermont, vegetables, beef, pork, whatever. But we have the flexibility of processing where we need to. And again, I'll admit, I'm very biased on that. I'll admit that. But I'm just throwing out there for full disclosure. So I've talked. Do you have questions about what I've said?
Yeah, thank you, Bart. And I'm sure we'll have some questions. I'll start with one, and if you need to cut us off, because I know you've got other.
I have a
you've got
hard stop at
chores.
10,
Yeah.
that's all, yeah.
Okay, great. Could you handle more demand for ground beef?
Oh,
from the
yeah.
school- From the
As long
schools?
as I can process it in New Hampshire, and clearly I'll use Vermont cattle, because that's really simple. I work with Vermont farmers, we bring them on a truck. If I have to work with New Hampshire farmers, it's a separate, so I can segregate it easily. I could do, and I would love to do a lot more ground beef. In fact, here's an example. Right now, we bought the facility in November. I had a list of farmers that wanted all their beef and pork done that was, I don't know how many pages big. I am now down to 0 because everybody, and we can talk about this for another time for sure, the whole slaughter crisis and all that. The only crisis is everybody wants everything done October through December. And historically, nobody wants anything done February through May. So that's what I'm in now. So from my standpoint, if I could have this program perpetuated so that, from my standpoint, if I could supply ground beef to the schools, the hospitals, the colleges, and provide a Vermont ground beef year round, that would be huge. Because like right now, I can say I got 3 or 4 weeks where we're going to be slow. We're going to work with a lot of the farmers around Vermont, get the cold cows, the bulls, the steers, whatever, bring this through, keep my crew busy so I can turn the lights on and keep everybody going. We make the ground beef and we freeze it because everything we do for the schools is always frozen, and the same with the 1 pound going for the other channels we do. We always do it frozen. So we have a lot of flexibility there. So it's really, it's a lot bigger than just, hey, it's business. It's business that's dependable. We can freeze it. We're not worried about shelf life. It helps us fill a void when we have these ups and downs on needing more work now and on having to sell more ground beef in November. And it gives a lot of awareness to the community members, the parents, and the kids that someday become customers.
You mentioned a 40-cent differential between the commodity and your product. Has that been consistent even with inflation?
It's at least that. It's at least that, if not a buck. It's more. It's commodity ground beef is really cheap, and I keep looking at that. I wonder how they do it, but it's also a quality issue. You get what you pay for, like anything, And when and the companies that do the basic cafeteria school foods, they're not going out shopping for the really good 80/20 that you get at your local pubs and restaurants. It's the cheap stuff. They might have burgers they make out of it or mixing in with lasagna or whatever. It is what it is,
Just because I think this is something we're focused on, what's a good number to talk about with a price differential? A range even. If 40 cents isn't the right number, I don't want to repeat that.
Okay, then I'd call it at least a buck a pound. You're probably talking a good 25 to 30% difference.
Okay, great, thank you.
It's substantial. Yeah.
Dave.
Yeah, with your slaughtering taking place in New Hampshire, are you still eligible? Is your product still eligible for the local grant system for the school, universal school?
Going forward, I don't know. I know this past year, we had already had the contract, we were signed up, and my broker lined it all up, checked with the people, and they were fine. I'm not even sure who you talked to. But so the question you're asking, I don't know. I hope we are. And if we're not, I'm going to be really, really bummed. But it is what it is. And maybe that's something at your level you can look at. And again, I'm going to admit I'm very biased on this, but I will say that we've been doing this for a while, and we're one of the few players out there that can make this happen on a large scale. Like if the state needs, 20, 30, 40,000 pounds of ground beef over the course of the year, we can do that. We're probably the only ones out there that can, and we can do it well and do it consistently,
And when are you going to start raising sheep? That's a joke.
Yeah, I'd like to say something, but I don't think I can use those words here. I'm not when a certain place freezes over, put it that way. We do beef and pork, and that's all we do. That's all we do.
Representative Rice has a question.
Yeah, just wondering, Mark, if you can tell us how much of your beef is getting into the schools right now, pounds, dollars, whatever. Like, how much is represented and in the context of how much might not be there if processing in New
Oh,
Hampshire.
well, I can tell you that in a nutshell. I think we did either $30,000 or $40,000 worth last year to the school system, and without the program, it would have been zero. I know that for a fact. You know.
Great.
Thank you.
Representative Bryan?
Mark, so if something is labeled Boyden beef, is it all raised on your farms, or do you actually buy
No.
beef from
No.
other people?
So we have two labels. We have our Boyden Farm Grass Plus, which is the certified antibiotic free, and we raise them. They're mostly grass fed, but we find them up with corn and also flax, and that's what we sell like to the Healthy Livings, the city markets in Boston, whatever. And we finish those at our farm. So we work with farmers around Vermont, bring those in, hold them a short amount of time, fatten them up, and then take them to slaughter. Our basic Boyden Farm that has no claims on it is just we work with local farmers around the area, get really good beef, and it's from local farms.
So
Anything we did with the program, we made sure it was Vermont only because we are in New Hampshire, so I work with New Hampshire farmers because we also, as we bought the facility, we renamed it Montshire Packing, and we have a brand name for there called Montshire Farms because as we bought the facility, it was PT Farm, and they had their PT Farm beef and pork, so obviously we had to rebrand that, and so we just rebranded that as Montshire Farms, and that's no claims, and it's New Hampshire beef, it's Vermont beef, it's just good local stuff that we work with local farmers for.
So would it help management wise if these Vermont beef farmers say, fed hay to their animals through February and then sent them off to you rather than everybody wanting, of course, to get rid of their animals?
I'll have to sign off soon, but we're going to have a whole nother Zoom call to talk about that. I can give you an earful, and it's been the problem that's been going on for decades is we're trying to get through people's heads that you just can't call me and book for October or call in September and want in October, November. People have to learn that people like us that provide the service, we need it year round. And if you're going to do 12 beef a year, then try to do one a month or two every other month or something. It has to be that way. And that's a problem that's been going on for generations, I'm going to have to sign off. But thank you all
you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, take a breath. And I realized after you got started that we hadn't introduced ourselves, and probably that was the best way to go given the time constraint. But so we've got this 10:30 election, and what I thought we could do is take a break and just come back and have a quick discussion. But before we take a break, anybody have any comments on anything that we just heard over the last hour?
I just feel like we need to have him back again. I think there's a lot of sort of institutional knowledge that he can share. And, if he sells $30,000 to $40,000 to schools, but he would have sold zero without the program. We need to figure out how he's made that work for himself.
Yes.
Because I'm very curious, because that seems like the biggest success story we've heard so far.
Which program?
The farm to school.
Specifically the grants for local food.
Yeah.
Had nothing to do with the slaughter facility in New Hampshire.
No.
Some of the farms.
I was just struck by hearing what Joy said about these programs, the farm stand, that you'd be able to use SNAP in farm stands, the farm stand match, as a sort of conduit, as a path to get community people in the door of these places and see that there is accessible food there. Whether it's, okay, they're purchasing food for half off and the farm is getting full price reimbursed, or it's just they get in and their sort of mindset is shifted that it's not all expensive heirloom tomatoes. There's actually stuff that they can afford every day to help feed their family. And that was just sort of, that struck me as an important message to carry through. That these programs are helping feed people, but they're also helping make these connections to local food. It seems really relevant to our community.
They made a big investment at that farm on Route 15 because they're open, 8 months a year, 7 months a year, police staff, compared to many farm stands they go to. You put some in a box
Yeah.
and get it.
I know at our local farmer's market, which is a pretty hop-in market, we have, for every $10 you spend, you get $30 back. And I'm not sure how that's funded. If you have an EBT card, it's cash crop dollars. And it's been really hard to get the folks who use the food shelf to come to the farmer's market because there's still that public stigma. So we still have to work around that. So a farm stand might be a better way, in a way, because it's not as public. And it seems like she's doing an amazing job.
Yes.
Okay, well, why don't we stop there then? Yeah, let's take 10 minutes and then just come back and we'll talk about, we'll come back to this.